There's no easy way to say this, but sometimes life hands you the truth at the exact moment you least expect it and in the most bizarre way possible. For me, it happened at exactly 5 a.m. on an ordinary Tuesday morning. The alarm blared like it always did, tearing me out of a deep sleep. Groggy and disoriented, I reached over to shut it off. But instead of the usual generic ring on or Siri's polite, "Good morning, here's your update," something different happened. Siri said my name, clear as day, in a mechanical but unmistakable voice. "James, you were amazing last night." I froze. Completely. My hand hovered over the phone like I'd just touched a live wire. It wasn't a dream. I wasn't hallucinating. The message repeated itself once more before the alarm sound kicked back in, snapping me into reality. I snatched the phone off the nightstand and stared at it like it had betrayed me. My wife, Caroline, lay peacefully beside me, oblivious. The same woman who kissed me goodnight just a few hours ago. The same woman who, for months, had been distant, tired, too busy with work projects to spend time together. I always chalked it up to stress. Deadlines. Life. You name it. I trusted her. I never questioned anything. But now, staring at the screen, heart hammering in my chest, I realized something chilling. Siri doesn't just make up names. Someone had recorded that voicemail, and Caroline had forgotten to delete it. Somehow Siri picked it up when the alarm went off. My fingers trembled as I unlocked the phone. I navigated to the voicemail app, pulse racing, stomach turning into knots. There it was. A single voicemail left at 2:47 a.m. From a number I didn't recognize. No name. No contact saved. For a moment I hesitated. Maybe it was a mistake. Maybe it wasn't what I thought. Maybe I was being paranoid. But then again, when your own name is whispered by Siri in a stranger's voice, paranoia doesn't quite cover it. I tapped the message. And what I heard made my blood run cold. A man's voice. Smug. Laughing. And then, clearly, unmistakably, my wife's voice, soft, playful, and saying words I never imagined hearing from her, not directed at someone else. Words she hadn't said to me in years. Words that left no room for doubt. I sat there, phone in hand, in the dim pre-dawn light, staring at her sleeping face. She looked so innocent. So peaceful. Meanwhile, inside me, something broke. Not with anger, not with shouting, but with a hollow, sickening ache I knew I would never be able to fully heal. And that was just the beginning. Because what I uncovered next, when I decided to dig deeper, would shatter everything I thought I knew about my marriage and about the woman sleeping 2 feet away from me. The hours that followed were a blur. I sat motionless on the edge of the bed, phone clutched in my hand, mind racing faster than I could process. Every now and then Caroline stirred in her sleep, mumbling something incoherent before turning to her side, blissfully unaware of the hurricane building inside me. I replayed the voicemail over and over as if hearing it one more time would somehow make it less real. It didn't. If anything, it made the betrayal feel sharper, deeper. This wasn't a misunderstanding. It wasn't a joke or a prank or some weird coincidence. It was real. By 6 a.m. I had made up my mind. I wasn't going to confront her immediately. No yelling, no accusations. I needed evidence. Proof. Something undeniable, not just for her, but for me, because part of me still didn't want to believe it. Part of me clung to the hope that there was some twisted explanation that didn't end with my marriage crumbling to dust. While she slept, I did something I never thought I would do. I went through her phone. It was surprisingly easy. She didn't have a passcode. She trusted me, or maybe she had gotten too comfortable, too careless. At first, there was nothing unusual. Standard texts to coworkers, family group chats, boring emails about client meetings. But then I noticed something odd. A hidden folder in her photo app labeled Work Docs. Innocent enough, except it wasn't. Inside were hundreds of pictures. Most were boring screenshots, random memes, the kind of clutter everyone accumulates. But buried deep, almost hidden, were photos that made my stomach churn. Selfies Caroline had taken late at night, dressed in outfits I had never seen, in places I didn't recognize. Pictures where she was smiling in ways she hadn't smiled with me for a long time. And worse, a few photos clearly taken by someone else, someone standing close enough to her that I could practically feel the intimacy radiating off the screen. Then there were the messages. Buried in a third-party app she had downloaded for work communication, a messaging app that supposedly encrypted everything. I found hundreds of chats between her and a contact saved under the name S. The conversations were nauseating, flirty, secretive, full of inside jokes I wasn't part of. She talked about me, not with love or affection but with disdain. Mockery. Saying things like, "He's so clueless and I'll make up some excuse to be gone this weekend too." Reading those messages was like watching the foundation of my life crack open beneath my feet. Every shared moment, every memory we had built over years together, it all suddenly felt like a lie. And yet, as devastating as it was, a darker curiosity gripped me. I needed to know more. Who was S? How long had this been going on? Was this just emotional cheating, or had it crossed physical lines too? Though deep down, after that voicemail, I already knew the answer. I copied everything, screenshots, photos, messages, and sent them to my private email. Then I carefully put her phone back exactly where I found it. When Caroline finally woke up around 7:30 a.m., she smiled at me sleepily, stretched her arms, and asked if I wanted coffee. I said yes. Calmly. Casually. As if my entire world hadn't just exploded into a million jagged pieces. Because now I had a plan. And what Caroline didn't know was that I wasn't going to confront her immediately. No. I was going to watch. I was going to wait. And I was going to find out just how deep the betrayal went before deciding whether to burn it all down. The next few days felt like living inside a slow-motion nightmare. Every glance Caroline threw my way, every casual conversation over dinner, every kiss goodnight felt like some twisted theater performance, and I was sitting in the front row pretending not to know the whole thing was a lie. But behind my composed expression, my mind was a battlefield. I replayed everything with new eyes, the late nights at the office that never made sense, the sudden weekends away for client retreats, the times she claimed she was too tired, too stressed, too busy for us. It had been happening right under my nose and somehow I hadn't seen it. Or maybe I hadn't wanted to. I needed more. Not because I wanted to torture myself further, no, that pain was already unavoidable, but because I had decided something. I would not let her twist the story when the time came. I would not be the desperate husband begging for answers or the fool she could gaslight. I needed the full truth, ugly as it was. So, on Saturday night, when she told me she had an emergency meeting with a client downtown, I didn't argue. I didn't question her. I simply nodded and offered to drop her off. She declined, of course, said it was faster if she drove herself. I smiled and agreed. Then, as soon as her car disappeared down the street, I grabbed my keys and followed at a distance. Tracking her wasn't difficult. Caroline had never expected me to doubt her, and she certainly didn't expect me to trail her like some amateur detective. She didn't go downtown. She didn't even pretend. Instead, she drove straight to a small, trendy boutique hotel on the outskirts of the city. A hotel that offered no questions, no credit card records tied back to home. I parked 2 blocks away, my heart pounding so loudly I was sure it would give me away. From my vantage point across the street, I watched her step out of her car, adjusting her hair, checking her reflection in the window like a teenager on a date. Then a man appeared, a tall figure wearing a casual jacket and baseball cap, someone who clearly felt comfortable enough to greet my wife with a kiss that was anything but friendly. It was him. It had to be S. I snapped a few photos with my phone, hands trembling, documenting every second as Caroline linked her arm through his and they disappeared inside the lobby. For a moment, I just stood there, rooted to the sidewalk, every fiber of my being screaming to rush after them, to rip the mask off this farce. But I didn't. I couldn't. I had made a decision, no confrontation until I had everything. Instead, I booked a room in the same hotel. Different floor. Different wing. I sat in that lonely, sterile room for hours, phone in hand, refreshing apps, scrolling through the screenshots I had gathered. Every so often, I thought about what they might be doing just a few floors above me. And every time, the cold, detached part of me reminded the emotional side, you need to know. You need to see it through. Around midnight, I got my confirmation. A door down the hall creaked open. Soft giggles echoed in the corridor. I cracked my own door just a sliver and watched Caroline, wearing an oversized hoodie that wasn't hers, sneak down the hallway with S. They disappeared into a supply closet, not even bothering to be discreet. The sounds that followed were faint but unmistakable. I closed the door gently, leaned my head against the wall, and let out a long, slow breath. There it was. Unfiltered. Undeniable. The final nail in the coffin. The woman I loved, the woman I trusted, wasn't just unhappy, she had built an entirely separate life when I wasn't looking. And somehow she thought she was clever enough to keep me blind to it forever. But now she had no idea that the man she thought was sleeping soundly at home had witnessed everything. And the next phase of my plan was about to begin. The next morning, Caroline came home wearing the same jeans and sweater she had left in, her hair slightly messy, sunglasses hiding her tired eyes even though it was cloudy. She tossed her purse onto the counter, muttered something about early meetings running long, and greeted me with a distracted kiss on the cheek. I played my part perfectly, smiling, asking if she wanted breakfast, pretending like nothing in the world had changed. But inside, I was a different man. The blindfold had been ripped off and everything I thought I knew about her, about us, was gone. I spent the entire day acting normal. We grocery shopped. We watched TV. We ordered pizza. It was a performance, but not for her, for me. Every moment was about gathering more pieces, more observations, while I still had the upper hand. She texted him during the movie, thinking I wasn't paying attention. She smiled at her screen in that subtle, infatuated way she hadn't smiled at me in months. And still, she didn't suspect a thing. The more I watched her, the more I realized how deep the deception ran. Caroline wasn't just sneaking around for thrill or attention, this was premeditated. Calculated. There were moments she looked at me and I could see it, the subtle contempt in her eyes, the impatience. She thought she had outgrown me, moved past me, and now she was just biding her time until she found a way to leave without damaging her public image. That night, when she fell asleep next to me, I unlocked her phone again. The messages were worse now. Filthier. More detailed. Plans for another weekend away, lies she would tell me to cover it up. She even joked about it, saying she could tell me she was going on a wellness retreat while spending 3 days in a cabin with S. Reading her words felt like swallowing broken glass. But hidden among the chats, I found something else. A conversation where she mentioned needing access to certain financial accounts. She said she was planting the seeds to get what she needed. At first, I didn't understand until I realized she wasn't just cheating on me emotionally or physically. She was planning to rob me blind. Our joint savings, the retirement funds, even the emergency account I thought only I knew about, she had been quietly maneuvering, charming her way into gathering information. The realization hit harder than anything else. It wasn't just betrayal of love, it was betrayal of trust at the most basic, human level. She wasn't just done with me, she wanted to leave me broken, stripped, humiliated. I didn't sleep at all that night. I lay there, staring at the ceiling, listening to her soft breathing beside me, feeling an anger so cold and sharp it almost felt like clarity. I understood now. Caroline wasn't the person I fell in love with. She wasn't even close. Somewhere along the way, she had changed and I hadn't seen it. Or maybe, deep down, I had refused to see it. But now there was no room for doubt. The next morning, while she showered, I took the final steps. I moved half the money out of our joint accounts into a separate one under my name, perfectly legal, given that I was listed as co-owner. I made copies of every critical document, the mortgage, insurance policies, car titles. I called a lawyer. Quietly, efficiently, no drama. No shouting matches. Just cold preparation. And when Caroline stepped out of the bathroom, towel wrapped around her, hair dripping wet, and smiled at me like everything was normal, I smiled right back. Because she had no idea. No idea that I had already started setting the pieces in motion. No idea that the man she thought was too passive, too trusting, too boring had seen everything and was about to turn her carefully constructed world upside down. For the next week, I lived a double life. By day, I played the same devoted husband I had always been, making coffee, taking out the trash, asking about her work. Smiling when she smiled, laughing at her jokes. But underneath the surface, I was building an exit strategy so precise that she wouldn't even see it coming until it was far too late. Each night after she fell asleep, I refined the details. The lawyer I hired was a friend of a friend, someone discreet, experienced in handling complicated divorces where financial infidelity was involved. He was careful, methodical, and just as coldly professional as I needed him to be. We met twice in secret, reviewing documents, establishing timelines, building a file so thick and airtight it could strangle any attempt she might make to claim innocence or sympathy. Screenshots, bank records, hotel reservations, private investigator reports, I spared no detail. Every piece was evidence and every bit of it was devastating. I didn't want revenge in the emotional sense. I didn't want to scream at her, didn't want to hurt her the way she had hurt me. No. I wanted something much colder. I wanted clarity. I wanted freedom. And I wanted to make sure she never got a dime more than she deserved, which was exactly nothing. Meanwhile, Caroline continued playing her role, clueless to how thin the ice beneath her feet had become. She kept meeting with S, sneaking around with the same sloppy arrogance. It was almost insulting how little effort she put into hiding it anymore. One night, she even claimed she had to stay late at work and left wearing a tight black dress that didn't exactly scream team meeting. I kissed her on the cheek, told her to have a good night, and then watched through the front window as she climbed into an Uber that, according to the receipt forwarded automatically to our joint email account, dropped her off at yet another hotel. I smiled, closed my laptop, and called my lawyer to give him the latest update. The final piece fell into place when I discovered the plane tickets. She had purchased 2 tickets, first class, to a beach resort we had always dreamed of visiting together. Only this time she wasn't planning to go with me. She had booked them for herself and S under fake names, but the billing information didn't lie. The tickets had been bought with money siphoned quietly from our joint savings over the last 3 months. That was it. The moment I saw those tickets, something inside me settled. The doubt, the guilt, the lingering sadness, all of it crystallized into cold, clear resolve. I decided the confrontation would happen on a Saturday morning. I wanted it to be quiet, controlled, no public drama. Just the 2 of us. One last act in this tragic play. That Friday night, I barely slept. Not from nerves, but from a strange, electric anticipation. I wasn't scared anymore. I wasn't sad. I was ready. Saturday arrived, cool and gray, fitting for what was about to happen. Caroline came downstairs in sweatpants and a messy bun, sipping coffee like nothing in the world was wrong. I let her finish her cup. I waited until she was scrolling absent-mindedly on her phone, probably texting him, before I set a thick manila folder on the kitchen island between us. She looked up confused. Smiled weakly. "What's this?" she asked, laughing lightly like it was some silly thing. "Open it," I said simply. She opened the folder and immediately paled. Her fingers trembled as she flipped through the pages, photos, chat transcripts, bank records, travel itineraries. Every secret she thought she had buried so carefully laid bare in brutal black and white. Her mouth opened and closed like she was searching for words, but none came out. Finally, she managed a strangled, "James, I can explain." "No," I interrupted calmly. "You won't explain anything. You're going to listen." And for the first time in months, maybe years, she did. Silent. Defeated. I laid it all out. How I had known for weeks. How I had collected everything. How the money she stole had already been reclaimed. How the house was already in the process of being transferred solely to me. How the divorce papers were already filed and all she needed to do was sign. And then I dropped the final bomb. I knew about the tickets. About her plan to leave. About how she had planned to disappear without telling me anything, assuming I'd be too heartbroken and confused to react. Caroline's face crumpled. Not in sadness. Not in regret. But in sheer, naked panic. Because for the first time, she realized she wasn't in control anymore. She hadn't just lost me, she had lost the cushy, convenient life she had built by manipulating me. And there was nothing she could do to stop it. For a few minutes, the kitchen was filled with nothing but the sound of rustling papers and Caroline's shallow breathing. She gripped the edge of the counter like she might collapse, eyes darting across the damning evidence I had assembled against her. Every time she flipped a page, her face fell further, like she was drowning and realizing there would be no hand reaching out to save her. And still, she didn't cry. Not yet. Instead, she looked at me, desperate, calculating, trying to find the right move, the right lie that could undo this tidal wave she hadn't seen coming. "James, please, we can work through this," she finally said, voice shaking. "It didn't mean anything. I made a mistake. I was confused. I still love you." It was almost impressive, the speed with which she pivoted. Just hours ago, she had been planning a romantic escape with her lover, funded with money she stole from me. Now, caught in her own web, she clung to whatever scrap of loyalty she thought she could still fake. But it was too late. I wasn't the naive husband anymore. "You loved me?" I asked quietly, my voice steady. "When you were sneaking into hotels? When you were laughing about me behind my back? When you drained our accounts to run away with him?" Each word hit her like a slap, and she winced, shrinking into herself. "I wasn't going to take all of it," she whispered weakly, as if that somehow made it better. I just stared at her. No yelling. No begging. No bargaining. The silence between us was heavier than any scream could have been. She realized it too, realized that the man standing in front of her wasn't playing anymore. I wasn't broken. I wasn't pleading. I was finished. The next moments were almost surreal. Caroline tried everything. Tears, apologies, promises, even threats. She said she would tell everyone it was my fault, that I had driven her to it by neglecting her, by being boring, by focusing too much on work. She tried to rewrite the narrative before my eyes, painting herself as the victim, as someone who had been pushed into betrayal. But I just stood there letting her unravel herself. Letting her see that none of it mattered anymore. She had crossed a line and there was no coming back. Finally, when it became clear that I wasn't biting, that there would be no forgiveness this time, the mask dropped completely. "You'll regret this," she hissed, venom replacing the fake sorrow. "You think you're punishing me? You're just throwing away everything we built." I smiled. Calm, cold? "You already threw it away," I said. "I'm just cleaning up the mess." I handed her the divorce papers, already notarized, already clean and simple. No assets to split because I had legally and carefully moved everything. No messy court battle. Just signatures. Final. Absolute. And then I told her she had 1 week to move out. I even offered to pay for a moving service out of pure courtesy, not for her, but to ensure she left quickly and cleanly. Caroline stared at the papers like they were a death sentence. And in a way, they were. Not because she loved me. If she had, we wouldn't have been standing there. But because she realized her golden ticket was gone. Her cushy life, her financial safety net, the man she had quietly despised but comfortably relied on, all ripped away in one morning she thought would be just another day of lies. She signed. Eventually. Silent tears slipping down her face, not from heartbreak but from sheer, bitter defeat. When the pen left the paper, I thanked her politely, gathered the documents, and walked away without looking back. Because that chapter of my life was over. And I wasn't about to waste another second mourning someone who had thrown me away so easily. The following week unfolded like a silent war playing out inside the walls of our home. Caroline, true to her word, or perhaps more accurately because she had no other choice, began packing. She moved with a kind of mechanical efficiency, boxing up her life piece by piece, all the while avoiding my eyes. It was almost like she was hoping that if she didn't look at me, she could pretend the walls weren't crumbling around her. But they were. Every item she tucked away was another reminder that she had gambled and lost spectacularly. I stayed out of her way. I didn't interfere. I didn't taunt or gloat. I didn't need to. My silence spoke louder than anything else possibly could. Every time she caught a glimpse of me calmly sipping coffee or reading on the porch like nothing had changed, it seemed to break her a little more. Because deep down, Caroline had expected something different. She had expected rage, begging, tears. She had expected a man destroyed by her betrayal, someone who would fall apart without her. Instead, she found a man who had already built a new life in the ashes of the old one. As moving day approached, her attempts to reach me grew more desperate. Little moments, awkward, pathetic moments, where she would try to reminisce about our past, about the good times. She'd bring up vacations we took, restaurants we loved, songs we danced to. All in a frantic effort to spark something in me. Some lingering affection she could weaponize. But it was gone. She had burned it to the ground. The night before she was set to leave, she cornered me in the living room. I had been quietly organizing some final paperwork when she appeared, barefoot and small, like the weight of her choices had finally settled onto her shoulders. "James," she said softly, voice cracking, "I know I messed up. I know I ruined everything. But can't we at least try? We spent years together. Doesn't that mean something?" I looked at her. Really looked at her. And for the first time since the whole nightmare began, I didn't feel anger. I didn't feel heartbreak. I felt absolutely nothing. She was a stranger to me now. It meant something, I said, my voice even and firm. It meant everything to the man I used to be. But that man doesn't exist anymore. You made sure of that. Her eyes filled with tears, but I didn't move to comfort her. I didn't reach out. I let her stand there in the ruins of what she had destroyed with her own hands. The next morning, she was gone. The moving truck came early. She loaded the last of her things without saying a word. I watched from the window as she climbed into her car, started the engine, and drove away without looking back. I didn't feel relief. I didn't feel triumph. Just a deep, profound quiet inside me, like standing in an empty house after a storm. There was sadness there, sure, but it wasn't for her. It was for the years I couldn't get back, for the man I had been, for the trust one had given so freely and lost forever. That weekend, I packed up a few things of my own and left too. Not because I had to, but because I wanted a fresh start somewhere she had never touched. I left behind the memories, the empty bed, the house filled with broken promises. I booked a small cabin a few hours away, overlooking a quiet lake. No internet, no distractions. Just time to rebuild. And it was there, sitting by the water with a cup of coffee in my hands, that I realized something that would stay with me forever. Sometimes, the worst thing that ever happens to you can also be the best thing. Because it strips away everything fake and leaves you with only what's real. And in that moment, for the first time in a long time, I was real again. Alive. Free. And ready for whatever came next. It took time. Healing doesn't happen overnight, no matter how much you wish it would. But those early mornings by the lake, watching the mist rise off the water, breathing in the cold, clean air, began to chip away at the weight I'd carried for so long. Little by little, the anger dissolved. The betrayal no longer felt like a fresh wound, but something distant, like an old scar that no longer hurt when touched. I wasn't broken anymore. I was rebuilding piece by piece, quietly and deliberately. I found peace in the small things. Cooking meals for myself again without feeling the need to rush. Reading novels late into the night without worrying about texts I wasn't supposed to see. Fixing up the cabin, replacing old light fixtures, sanding down rough patches of wood. It became a kind of therapy, a way to reclaim control over my life in a world that had spun out of my hands for too long. And somewhere along the way, something even better happened. I found myself smiling again. Not the forced smiles I used to give when Caroline asked if everything was okay, not the hollow smiles I wore when trying to pretend our marriage wasn't crumbling. These smiles were real. Honest. They came from the simple, pure joy of being free from lies, free from walking on eggshells, free from carrying the weight of someone else's deceit. One afternoon, about 6 months after the divorce was finalized, I met someone. I wasn't looking for it. I wasn't desperate to fill the void. It just happened naturally and quietly, like the way spring slips into winter without anyone noticing at first. Her name was Hannah. She wasn't flashy or dramatic. She didn't play games or hide secrets behind fake smiles. She was real. And being around her felt easy in a way that I hadn't experienced in years. We started small, coffee dates, long walks, conversations that stretched into the early morning hours. And slowly, cautiously, I let my guard down. I told her my story, not all at once, but piece by piece. She listened without judgment, without trying to fix me or tell me what I should have done differently. She simply understood. With Hannah, there were no mind games, no second-guessing, no gnawing doubts eating away at me late at night. Just honesty, respect, and a sense of quiet happiness that I had almost forgotten existed. Looking back now, it's almost surreal how much my life has changed. If you had told me a year ago that I'd be sitting here today, writing this story from a sunny deck overlooking a lake, with a loyal dog snoozing at my feet and a woman who genuinely cares about me reading nearby, I would have laughed in your face. But here I am. And I wouldn't change a thing. Losing Caroline wasn't the end of my life, it was the beginning. The storm she created forced me to rebuild, but the life I built afterward is stronger, purer, and more beautiful than anything I had before. Sometimes the people who hurt you the most are the ones who unknowingly set you free. And sometimes the best revenge is simply living a life so full of peace, love, and joy that it makes the past feel like nothing more than a distant shadow. I'm not broken. I'm not bitter. I'm just finally truly free. And for the first time in a long time, the future doesn't scare me. It excites me. Because the best part of my story is still unwritten.